Hello, I'm Anthony. I want to do an unboxing video and also a review of a new controller yoke which I've received from Switzerland today. So this is my existing control yoke. This is the CH Flight Sim yoke. I've had it for 14 years. And out of those 14 years, about 7 of those years has been okay, not brilliant. And the other 7 of those years I really should have bought another control yoke, for reasons which shall be illustrated later. So, this is my first time opening this. Let's have a look. USB cable. Euro to UK socket adapter even. Euro socket, Euro plug even, transformer. So far so good. Show the star of the box. Brunner. Empty box. So this is what we've got. Let's see. Nearly there. Right. Let's just do a side-by-side comparison of the Brunner and the CH yoke. This is it's a much smaller yoke compared to the CH yoke here. It's not fully packaged like the CH yoke, so you don't have switches or throttles on the actual product. But what you do have are these. You got 3 push buttons on the left side. You've got a trim switch. And then you've got this this sort of mouse cursor on the right side. It's a smaller yoke. The range of travel is about the same as a Flight Sim yoke. Now, this is one of the reasons why I was getting rid of my Brunner, getting rid of my Flight Sim yoke. The response from the flight simulator is not very good. It lags behind the Flight Sim yoke quite a lot. Sometimes I can wiggle this left and right, and the yoke on the screen doesn't respond quickly or at all. So that's what it's been like for the last 7 years. It needs warming up, it needs exercising, and the other thing I've done is I've removed the springs inside here. I've got absolutely no force feedback. So all told, I'm going to hook things up and figure things out from this point. Okay, so I've hooked up all the cables. I'm also downloading the software now. Does a good initialization when you actually power it on. So I'll just demonstrate that now. So it just goes through a full operation check before you've even started anything. So I've now downloaded the software. So let's go and take a look at this. So in order to download the software, you need to apply for a username and password from the Brunner website. And once you've got that username and password, which happens straight away after you apply, so even if you get your product on a Friday evening, you're not going to have to wait until Monday morning, which is good. So I downloaded the CLS-2 sim, and we'll see what happens. There weren't any clamps included in this. I haven't checked the instructions online yet. I was expecting clamps to actually attach it to the edge of the desk, but those don't exist. The weight of the thing is quite a lot heavier than what you had for the CH Yoke. I'm hoping I can avoid having to drill into my table. So, hardware auto detection, I've done that. We haven't got gateway, so we've got the yoke, we've got USB, and we've got power in there. We do not have any CAN bus, so I'll just start the auto detection and I will connect this. So it's found the yoke straight away. See what happens when it times out, because I can't click on this icon. Here we are. So I click on finish. Okay, so this is the bit where I need some instructions, so I will do that in private. Okay, so I've been playing around with this for some time now, and overall I'm very, very impressed. It's really important that you don't map any pitch or roll axes to this control yoke within the X-Plane software. You need to use the software supplied by CLS-E Sim. What that does, it installs a plugin which you have to install separately to the actual CLS-E Sim software, and that enables it to interface directly with X-Plane. The other thing you need to do is, because X-Plane thinks there's no pitch and roll axes mapped to it, you need to use what's known as a virtual joystick, which you also install. And that virtual joystick, you can match a pitch and roll axis to any of those. And what that does, it gets rid of the crosshairs that you get in the middle of the screen. And those crosshairs you only get when there's no joystick configured, and it allows you to use your mouse to do pitch and roll. If you do that, then it means that you've got pitch and roll here, mapped directly from here onto there. Same thing goes for the buttons. You don't map any buttons within the X-Plane software. So trim up and trim down. Don't do anything in X-Plane. This is hardware control. So when you trim up, it will move the actual yoke back, and when you trim down, it moves the yoke forward. And that's how it works in real life. X-Plane doesn't do trim properly because they're using spring-loaded control yokes and joysticks, which don't respond to trim. What trim does is that it doesn't actually pitch your plane up and down. It just simply adjusts the resting position for your control inputs. So when I trim up, what you'll find is that the resting position for this will move back, and when I trim down, the resting position moves forwards. Other things like Autopilot, I've enabled on one of these buttons. I'm going to test that very soon. Within CLS-E Sim, there's something called Profile Manager, and that enables you to download custom profiles from the internet. So you need to set up, you've got something called Profile Cloud, and within Profile Cloud you have to register a new username and password, and that gives you access to various profiles for different aircraft. So I've got 4 aircraft downloaded. I've got one for the Cessna 172, which I'm just going to use as a typical single engine profile. I've got the Baron B58, which I'll use for a twin engine prop. I've got a Cirrus SF50, which is a single engine jet. And then I've got Boeing 737-800, which is perfectly good for a twin-engine jet. Let's go for a flight. You can link each of these profiles to the aircraft you've got loaded up. So I've linked up the Cessna 172. The yoke always drops forwards here, and that's simply because of the weight of the elevators acting on the yoke. It does feel quite a strong pull, but watch what happens when I switch this on. Once I switched it on, you can actually feel vibration in the control yoke, and that vibration varies according to how laboured the engine is. So you feel it quite a lot on the ground. They're still resting forward, but if I just apply throttle, so the prop wash will move the elevators into the central position because of the slipstream. You also notice it's actually tilting to the right. I'm not too sure what that's about, but let's go and take off, and we'll see what happens. I'm not too sure why it's moving to the right. I'm guessing there's probably some kind of slipstream effect on the ailerons, but the ailerons are quite a long way away from the rudders. From the prop wash. So that's that off. We'll put a bit of flap in, and we'll take off. So that's nice and smooth, that operation. If I trim down, you can see the yoke moving backwards, forwards, like so. If I right, so that is what I'll do is I'll pitch up quite a lot. If I rotate left and right, the input on the roll axis is quite it's quite light at this kind of speed. I'm doing 70 knots. So what I'll do is I'll get up to 1,000 feet, and then I'll speed up. And what I notice when I speed up is that the actual roll axis it becomes more and more difficult. And that was something when I was doing a trial flying lesson about a year ago. That was something I noticed with the actual Cessna. So now it's stiffened up. I'm doing about 100 knots, and it's a lot stiffer the roll motion than it was at 70 knots. It gives you some real feedback, which you just don't get with a spring-loaded control yoke. I like it a lot. Now, one of the things I did in my first test was I wanted to see what happened when I put some adverse rudder inputs. So I went like that, and so on. Now, I know from being from doing some gliding lessons that you typically get some adverse rolling when you put in some yaw, and likewise when you roll the aircraft, you get some adverse yaw. So they're coupled together. You don't get any feedback on your control yoke from that. So now I'm doing 120 knots, and you know you have to put quite a bit of force just to rotate it to the right. There's very little displacement here, but you get an abundance of feedback to say how much roll you're getting. So you can have very light movements here, and it makes a big impact. So you can just see I'm moving, banking 30 degrees to the left. I barely moved the control yoke, and I don't have any force feedback rudders. I've got the next best thing, which is the Thrustmaster pendular rudders, which are also very good, but they're just spring loaded. but overall I'm getting impressed. I've done this test with turbulence enabled in X-plane, and the bad news is that you don't get anything happening on your control yoke. There is a turbulence option selected within the Brunner software. I haven't tested it yet. One other little thing I want to do before I go onto the autopilot is I'll take the power off. Already I can tell the power's off because the vibrations have stopped, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just see what happens when I stall the plane. So at the moment the pitch operation is quite stiff. I expect that to get lighter as we get closer to the stall speed. So now I've got a bit of engine vibration. It's getting much lighter. Really light. Ailerons have gone. Yes, right, there we go. Put a bit of power on. So yeah, things get much lighter the closer to the stall speed you get, which is pretty good. So I'm going to try autopilot now. So let's just see where my Mr. Autopilot is. Right, where is it? I'll just do heading. So I'll do altitude select, and what I'll do is I will just dial in a heading. So now it's taking care of things all by itself. It's just taking care of things. So if I pitch up to a higher altitude, there doesn't seem to be any feedback here, but I have seen it on other aircraft where you get feedback. I'll do a rotate to the left. There we go. It's doing things here. So I quite like this. This is quite interesting. So, and of course, if I switch this off. Ooh, let's try this again. Sometimes I can hear a bit of vibration. The other thing I like about this compared to the old Yoke is that you can put your keyboard right on top. There's a lot of space here, and that's quite useful. It used to be the case that I had to have my keyboard over here, which wasn't very good when I wanted to just browse the internet whilst having the autopilot on. If I disconnect the autopilot, sort of twitches a bit there. I'm not too sure why. But yeah, overall it's what I call a very enjoyable first impression. I'm just going to come back into Aberdeen Airport, and we'll see whether I can nail this landing. I'm pretty sure I can. So all I have to do is just adjust the trim, and it will just find its resting position. The one comment I'll say about the built-in hardware trim is that it's not very fine. I could do with a bit more fine adjustments, and I'm pretty sure I can adjust that within the software. You can really feel when you're out of balance. So just put a bit of throttle on, nearly on the runway. It feels just like when I was at the controls of the Cessna 172 myself. It just has the right level of force to make it good. There we go. Nice and easy. Just like that. And then we'll just apply the brakes. And there we go, on the ground. Now, one key feature about the control yoke is that you need to have X-plane running on the runway like this, and definitely not within a settings menu. If you run it on the runway, there's no problem. As soon as you go into a settings and you start diving around, you often find yourself coming back out of the settings, and then your connection between the control yoke software and the flight simulator has disconnected. I haven't quite got to the bottom of that, but yeah, so it's just disconnected here. If you're in the menus for short lengths of time, it's no problem, but right now it's disconnected. So when I come back out, there's no response anymore, so then you have to reconnect. That kind of thing I find is, I think it's one of these things I could just describe as being a quirk. It just needs a bit of attention. So I just switch it off, and now I've just got a yoke which can go into almost any position in terms of roll. There's a little bit of resistance there, and of course if I want to pull it back, it will just naturally go back here. In terms of smoothness, rolling left and right is very smooth. You can feel that there's a little bit of roughness in the control yoke, but that doesn't mean, when it comes to fine motion, it's you get nice fine motion, but you can hear it. It's not totally friction free. Well, in summary, this is a very good control yoke. For light aircraft operation, I'm very, very impressed. I also tried this for the Boeing 737. I had a flight around of that. The first thing that struck me was the fact that as soon as I took off, it was out of trim. And that's one of the fundamental limitations with using hardware trim. It doesn't bear any relationship to the trim settings that you have dialed in on the Boeing 737. So if you've got an FMC which has calculated your center of gravity and given you a trim prescription on the trim wheel, that doesn't bear any relationship to the force feedback that you're going to get on this yoke. And this is something which is described in the manual. So you need to be mindful of that. I still haven't got to grips with it. But it is, overall, it's a very nice package. It offers a unique selling point over any of the other yoke options. You've got the CH yoke, which I've had for 14 years. It's the same yoke which is on sale today. You've got Cytec, which is on sale today. You've got Honeycomb Aeronautical, which are coming up with a yoke very soon. That's spring-loaded. If you step up a gear to Yoke, that is only a few £100 cheaper than this one, but it's still a spring-loaded yoke. I think the force feedback technology with this is very interesting. I've enjoyed using this yoke. I'm hoping this yoke is going to be with me for the next 14 years. Which is a big, bold statement. It's got a 2-year warranty, which gives me a lot of confidence. But if you invest in a good, proper control yoke for your flight simulator action with force feedback, I promise you it will add a huge amount of enjoyment to your flying on a simulator. I think that's all I've got to say. But thank you for watching.